Purgation. The first time the house breathed, I thought it was only my imagination. A faint exhalation, low and steady, moving through the corridors like smoke drifting through a lung. I stood at the threshold of the bedroom door, my hand trembling against the wood frame, and listened as the sound faded into silence. It was not the sigh of wind, nor the settling of timber. It was too deliberate, too measured. The house exhaled again. The air thickened with it. A weight pressed into my chest, pulling at my lungs, urging me to inhale deeper than I wanted to. The smell that came with it was not dust or mold, but something sharper, like singed hair, like fat burning on iron. I gagged quietly, hand to my mouth, the taste of it crawling across my tongue like oil. I tried to tell myself the word, purge. The thought came unbidden, whispering as though it had been left there for me to find. Purge. Cleanse. Strip away. But nothing about this place was clean. Nothing about this house felt holy. The wallpaper peeled from the corners in long curling strips, revealing plaster beneath that wept with damp. When I pressed my fingers against it, they came away slick, as though the walls themselves were sweating. The wooden floor groaned beneath me, its surface warped into slight ridges, as if something beneath had tried to claw its way upward. At night, the house changed. The air no longer carried the faint warmth of daylight, but instead clung with a clammy chill. Shadows lengthened unnaturally across the walls, not cast by any source I could find. Some bent at wrong angles, others moved subtly when I stood still. I could feel them drawing closer when I shut my eyes, hovering just above the bed, waiting for me to surrender to sleep. Sleep never came easily. When I closed my eyes, the darkness was not empty. It pressed inward, textured like damp cloth over my face, suffocating. I would jolt awake, gasping for air, lungs rattling as though filled with dust. Each time I woke, my chest felt rawer, as though scraped hollow by something I could not see. The smell of burning always returned with it, searing the back of my throat, making my stomach churn. The cellar was worse. Its door sat crooked at the end of the hall, warped by years of moisture, the handle stiff with rust. I avoided it as long as I could, but the house urged me toward it. Each step I took seemed to angle me nearer, the floor subtly slanting downhill no matter which way I walked. When I finally stood at the top of the cellar steps, the air that rose from below was thicker than any fog I had known. It clung to my clothes, dampening them instantly, and carried with it the unmistakable stench of scorched meat. I descended slowly, each tread groaning, the sound vibrating into my bones. The bulb above flickered, its glow failing to reach the bottom. I counted the steps, 10, 11, 12, until I felt stone beneath my shoes. The cellar walls were mottled, stone sweating rivulets that trickled down into shallow cracks in the floor. The air was alive with faint crackling, not like electricity, but like embers hidden deep within ash. I moved forward, and something beneath the surface of the walls pulsed. A faint glow, blood red, seeping through the mortar like light pushing through thin flesh. In the center of the floor was a stain, dark, irregular, almost black. It had soaked into the stone, spreading outward in veins like dried riverbeds. The smell there was unbearable. I covered my nose, but the stench seeped through my palms, filling me until I felt it in my stomach, curdling the contents within. When I turned back, the steps seemed farther away. The cellar exhaled. I doubled over, lungs convulsing, choking on the heavy air. My skin prickled as if thousands of tiny mouths breathed against it. The walls seemed to lean closer, the faint red glow strengthening, throbbing like a heartbeat. I stumbled forward, desperate for the stairs, my vision wavering. My hands brushed the damp stone, and it was warm, too warm, like touching the belly of a furnace. When I reached the top, I collapsed into the hallway gasping. My skin stank of smoke, though there was no fire. My fingernails had black soot embedded beneath them. After that night, the house no longer waited for me to come to it. It came to me. The smell of burning followed me everywhere, into the kitchen, into the bathroom, even into my clothes. I scrubbed until my skin bled, but the stench clung stubbornly, soaked into me like water into old wood. The mirrors reflected it back, my face gray with ash, my eyes bloodshot, rimmed with soot. But when I reached up to touch my cheek, the skin was smooth clean. My body betrayed me next. Each breath grew heavier, thick with phlegm I couldn't clear. My ribs ached as though the air itself bruised them from the inside. Sometimes I coughed so hard I swore I tasted blood, but the sink showed only clear water spattered with flecks of black. The word returned each night, not spoken, not heard, but pressed into my skull until it echoed. Purgation. The syllables rolled endlessly in my mind, like a chant, like a sentence. With each repetition, I felt something inside me strip away. First hunger, then thirst, then warmth. What remained was only the rhythm of breath, ragged and weak. I began to hear other sounds layered within the breath of the house. Screams muffled by stone, whimpers caught in the timber, a chorus of voices blending into one strained exhalation. They filled the air, weaving through the cracks in the plaster, seeping into my dreams until I woke with their cries vibrating in my throat. The cellar door no longer resisted me. It hung ajar, swollen wood finally bending to the will of the house. The air that rose from below was hotter now, like standing too close to an open oven. I should have turned away, but my body moved without will, guided down the steps into the glow beneath. The stain on the floor had spread. It now covered nearly the entire cellar, its veins bright with fresh moisture, glistening like open wounds. The stone pulsed beneath my feet, and the voices rose from it, a unified moan of endless expulsion. The house exhaled, and I exhaled with it. I fell to my knees, my chest seizing, my lungs collapsing inward. Something pushed its way out of me. Not air, but black smoke, bitter and acrid, spewing from my mouth, my nose, my eyes. It poured onto the floor, curling into the cracks, feeding the pulsing stain. The voices grew louder, rising into a frenzy. My vision blurred, colors twisting into smears of red and black. My body convulsed, racked by coughs that tore at my throat. The smoke continued to pour until there was nothing left inside me but emptiness. When I finally collapsed onto the warm stone, the cellar was silent. The house no longer breathed. I realized then what the purgation had been. The house was never cleansing itself. It was cleansing me. I was nothing more than a vessel to be emptied, a body to be stripped of its contents and fed into the wound beneath the stone. And now that I am hollow, I can feel the house waiting, its silence heavy, its breath held. It will inhale again soon. And when it does, it will not stop with me. Cataclysm. I knew something was coming long before it arrived. The signs were not thunderclaps or storms, not fires tearing across the horizon, but subtler, smaller, like tremors deep under the skin. A vibration in the bones of the house. A taste of iron in the air that coated the back of my tongue no matter how much water I drank. The silence of birds, who one day stopped singing in the trees outside and never returned. It was as if the world itself had begun to hold its breath, waiting for the first rupture. The house was my refuge once. Old brick and crooked beams, walls thick enough to keep out the winter chill, windows looking over the flat countryside. But lately it had become something else. The floors carried a hum I could feel through my feet, a low shudder that throbbed at irregular intervals like the faltering heartbeat of something ancient. The wallpaper curled at the seams, not with damp, but with heat, as though fire smoldered just behind the plaster. The smell was the worst. At first it was faint, dust and stone, the kind of scent you expect from old cellars. Then it deepened into something sharper, something like scorched metal and charred wood, carrying with it an acrid sting that made my eyes water. I woke each morning with the taste of ash in my throat, as though I had been breathing smoke in my sleep. The nights dragged longer. The shadows grew thicker. The air seemed heavier with each passing hour, and I found myself unable to shake the sense that something immense was building, waiting for release. Then the cracks began. Hairline fractures appeared along the walls, branching outward like veins. At first, they seemed natural, plaster settling, old foundations shifting. But they spread too quickly, spiderwebbing across ceilings, crawling down door frames, reaching outward as if hungry. The sound of them was constant, a faint snap, then another, then a cascade of soft crackling like ice breaking on a thawing lake. One night I woke to find a fresh fissure running the length of my bedroom wall, wider than the rest. From its depth came a faint glow, dull red, like the ember of a dying fire. When I pressed my ear to the crack, I heard something moving beneath the surface. Not rats, not insects. Something larger, slower, dragging itself through unseen spaces. The glow pulsed once, then vanished. I told myself I was imagining it, that exhaustion was making me see things. But the next morning, the crack was wider still, and the edges of the plaster around it were scorched black. The house smelled thickly of burnt soil, and when I touched the wall, it was warm. I stopped sleeping. The sounds grew louder, deeper, resonating through the very bones of the house. Groans like tectonic plates grinding together, dull thuds that shook the glass in the windows. Sometimes the floor shifted under my feet, subtle but undeniable, as though the ground beneath was stirring. The cellar became impossible to ignore. I had always avoided it, its door warped, its steps steep and treacherous, its air damp and heavy. But now, each night, a glow seeped up from the gaps between the boards at the top of the stairs. Faint at first, then brighter, red bleeding into the dark like firelight beneath water. The air there vibrated, humming with pressure, each breath hot and metallic. I descended one night, against every instinct screaming at me to stay away. The walls of the cellar were fractured. Huge veins of glowing stone split the earth, radiating heat so intense it prickled my skin. Dust rose from the fissures with each pulse, coating the air until it was hard to breathe. The floor was cracked open in the center, a jagged wound in the stone, glowing fiercely as though magma churned far below. From that wound rose not heat alone, but sound. A low, endless moan, like the groaning of the planet itself. I staggered back up the stairs, my head swimming, my lungs burning. Even once I slammed the cellar door shut, I could still hear it, deep, steady, vibrating through the entire house. The walls throbbed with it, the glass in the windows rattled, the beams groaned under invisible weight. The fractures spread faster. Entire chunks of plaster fell away, exposing brick split wide by glowing veins. The floorboards warped, splintered, and shifted, rising in uneven ridges as though something beneath pressed upward. The smell of burning was constant now, every breath filled with smoke and sulfur. The outside world was no better. The earth around the house cracked in long, jagged lines. The soil split apart in the garden, flower beds sinking into sudden fissures. The trees bent, their trunks groaning, roots tearing free from the soil. The horizon glowed faintly at night, as if fire smoldered just beneath the skin of the earth in every direction. There was no escape. The house and I had become part of it. Each breath I took was heavy with ash. My skin prickled constantly, as though charged with static. My bones ached, joints throbbing in rhythm with the low pulse beneath the ground. I began to cough up soot, flecks of black staining the sink each morning. Sometimes I thought I could hear faint whispers in the cracks around me, voices speaking in tones too low to distinguish, carried upward on the waves of heat. And then came the first collapse. It was not a thunderous event, not the dramatic destruction one might expect. It began quietly, a single beam snapping in the attic, the faint rattle of falling plaster. But then the house convulsed. The walls shuddered, bricks splitting apart, dust flooding the air. A deep roar rose from below, shaking every surface, rattling my teeth in my skull. The glow from the fissures flared bright enough to blind me, searing across the walls in jagged lines. The house did not simply fall, it was consumed from within. The cracks split wide, vomiting fire and ash, filling every room with choking smoke. The floor gave way in places, revealing glowing chasms beneath. Through the haze, I saw shapes moving, massive silhouettes shifting in the firelight, their forms obscured by smoke but their presence undeniable. They moved with a dreadful slowness, as though uncoiling after centuries of restraint. I stumbled through the house, lungs tearing, eyes streaming, my body trembling with every vibration. The walls fell around me, ceilings collapsing, beams splintering. The roar grew unbearable, a cacophony of stone and fire and unseen voices screaming in unison. And then, in one final convulsion, the house exhaled. The roof tore open, the ground split wide, and a column of heat and light surged upward, carrying with it a sound that was not thunder but something older, something deeper. The air itself seemed to rip apart, reality groaning, as though it could no longer contain what had been buried. I do not remember falling, but I must have. I woke on the ground outside, the house nothing but a crater of glowing stone, the earth around it split into endless fractures radiating outward. The horizon was aflame, the sky a bruised black churning with ash. I do not know if I survived. My lungs burn with every breath, my skin is scorched, my vision swims. The ground still pulses beneath me, each throb heavier than the last, as though the world itself is laboring toward some final release. This was no collapse of a house, no mere fire, no simple quake. This was something older, a cataclysm buried beneath the skin of the earth, patient, waiting for the moment it could finally break free. And now that it has begun, I know there will be no end.